Andy Johnson, I hope to explain or describe what critical race theory is. Some people are fully against it, which is okay, but you should at least understand what that thing is you're against. Some of what they describe as critical race theory has nothing to do with critical race theory. It's a cartoonish and distorted view of what critical race theory is. So let's understand what it is. But first, what it is not. It has nothing to do with Marxism. Nothing at all. It uses the word equity, which is related to fairness and justice, not equal outcomes. Equity is different than equal outcomes. All right? Fairness and justice. Now that word, equity, it's a stretch to connect it with Marxism, and that has become an emotional buzzword. They're teaching our children that capitalism is bad and Marxism and communism and socialism just is not true at all. It doesn't teach children to hate white people. Absolutely not. Boys and girls, today we're going to learn how to hate white people. It doesn't. That would be a silly idea. It doesn't teach children to be ashamed of being white. Shame on you. You're white. It just doesn't do that. I'm sorry. And it doesn't promote the idea that America is bad or they should hate George Washington or all this stuff. Saying it so doesn't make it so. Just does not do that. So what is it? It's a theory. A theory is a way to explain a set of facts. It explains phenomena by connecting the data dots to form a picture. Different theories connect different data dots differently. This theory explains systemic racism. Critical race theory connects a lot of data dots related to systemic racism. It invites us to critically examine our policies and practices, our traditions. And these are uncomfortable conversations to have, but they're necessary conversations if we are to evolve our thinking and to continue to evolve our country. It originated in the 70s. It came out of the legal system. Derek Bell, Alan Friedman, Richard Delgado, they were concerned with the slow pace of racial reform in the United States. Yes, during the 60s we had these marches, but they produced fewer and fewer smaller gains. Gloria Ladson-Billing is a scholar widely noted as taking this theory that originated in the legal system and using that same lens to look at education. So it started in the legal system, and then it evolved to look at education as well. It creates a lens through which we view our different systems, a lens to look at our legal systems, economic, political, prison, educational systems, and others. A lens through which to view reality. It asks these questions when looking at our different systems. Who's to gain? Who gains? Who gets the resources? Who's advantaged and who's disadvantaged? How are the marginalized populations depicted? Whose voice gets heard? Who's included and excluded? Who gets the opportunity? Who gets punished? Who gets rewarded? Who gets attention? Who's making money? And what makes it difficult for some and easier for others? This is the lens through which these different systems are examined. So 7 big ideas related to critical race theory. And again, I would recommend this book, Richard Delgado, Gene Stefanik. Number 1, racism is normal. It's so ingrained in our societal consciousness that most of us don't see it. However, our brains see racism in the form of implicit bias. Our policies and programs, our laws and procedures see racism as well. It's systemic. This is what systemic racism is. It's so normal, we don't see it. I don't see racism. Exactly, that's the problem. We must unmask it and expose it for change to occur. Here's a definition of systemic racism. It has to do with systems, political, economic, legal, judicial, educational. It includes the policies, procedures, rules, laws, regulations, traditions, institutions, and the paradigms, ways of viewing reality, that disadvantage people of color while providing advantage to the white privileged majority in terms of who gets the opportunities and who gets the resources. That's systemic racism. That's one definition of systemic racism. The second big idea, change will only occur when it aligns with the interest of those in power, when it coincides with the changing economic conditions, self-interest, and political power of the 1 to 5%. The Washington Redskins, the owner said he would not change the name. No, never, ever. What happened? The sponsors started pulling their ads, and suddenly an epiphany occurred and we had change. The same happened in the NBA when the Milwaukee Bucks, during the NBA playoffs, they said, nope, we're not playing tonight. And all of a sudden we saw some Black Lives Matter signs and other things on the NBA courts, and they began to take this stuff seriously. Change will only occur when it aligns with the interests of those in power. Change is a social construct. It has no basis in biology. It's an arbitrary category based on physical appearance that society has created, based around this idea of this mythical white norm. Arbitrary categories used to sort human beings. A sorting mechanism that has physical and psychological and material impacts, creating winners and losers. This social construction. Oh, I think we'll put these people in this group, those people in that group. White is normal, you see, and if you're not white, you are whatever. That's the norm. The fourth idea is no person has a single identity. There's this idea of intersectionality. We have multiple identities. We're not just a black person, we're a black woman, a black man, sexual orientation, race, socioeconomic status. We have different identities. Understanding oppression and marginalization, however, in one group helps us understand it in another. If I am feeling marginalized because of sexual orientation, I can use this to understand marginalization in the area of race. Both ways. And there could be a black person who is a woman who is also LGBT. We don't exist in single categories. Who is also very poor and of a different religion. We exist in multiple categories. All people in a category do not think the same. Physical characteristics by racial terms do not indicate deeper underlying commonalities. I can't have one black person speak for all of black people, a famous person, and this often happens. Oh, this famous person said, therefore all black people or Asian people or indigenous people think the same way. Individuals. One person should not be asked to be the spokesperson for the entire group. Now this gets a little more difficult to hear, but the stories of people must be heard and honored. It's essential in making progress towards social justice and racial equity. And there's a variety of ways for people's voices to be muted and muzzled. One of them is describing numbers without context. This is done in education a lot, in social research. 23% of the people found, 68% were, the 29th percentile was. Without context, these numbers provide a distorted view of reality. This is why we need to use qualitative research along with quantitative research to describe, to understand the voices of the people. Another way of muting the voices is by disremembering or misremembering history. We tend to present, as I grew up in the 60s and 70s, I call it the McGraw-Hill version of reality. History described by the elite power, not by those who are marginalized. Described through the lens of the privileged majority. This is how history gets disremembered when marginalized groups are included in the conversation. Indigenous people, Black people, it's usually a cartoonish view or distorted view or a misrepresentation of what their experience was like. I would invite you to read about U.S. history from something other than a white Eurocentric perspective. One of these books, and they're powerful and they are hard to read, but they tell of history from the indigenous people's point of view, or African American, or Latinx. These pictures are hard to look at because they're true. This happened. These pictures are hard to look at because it's true. It happened. Now, this does not say that America is bad and white people should be ashamed. Absolutely not. It doesn't say that we should not include things. Nope, nope. It says we need to fully remember all of American history from all people's points of view. There were some really good things. There are some really good things. But remembering all of it, including all of it, enables us to continue to evolve our society and our thinking and our nation. And of course, when I show pictures that are hard to look at, developmentally appropriate, no, I wouldn't show those to an elementary classroom. Absolutely not. Developmentally appropriate, including the perspectives of all people in this great country. Cultural superiority, the last idea, and this idea of a mythical norm, these are reifying factors. The idea that one's own culture is the correct one and is to be used as a standard of comparison. This is called cultural parochialism. Practices and customs and ideas and views and values that don't align with this one point of view are seen as deviant, as defective, or inferior. Right and wrong, good and bad, normal, abnormal, are determined by the majority white culture. This does not say that white people are bad or that white culture is bad. It said it should not be used as the norm to which all others are evaluated. Again, this does not say that white people are bad or that white culture is bad. It should not be the norm to which all others are evaluated. A standardized way of that things should be. That's that fallacy, this cultural superiority. They should be like us, those people. If only they were like us, if only they had our values and our views, if they would just assimilate like my grandfather who was Norwegian, everything would be fine. Our values are the right ones. Again, this does not say that white people are bad. It says that it should not be used, it should not be the norm to which all others are evaluated. Some of the sources used here. Now, when people disagree and call me bad names, and that's okay. They do that on the computer a lot of times. Ooh, they say some very bad things about me. I always ask, okay, that's fine. I could be a bad person. Which one of these ideas did I get wrong? And it's okay to disagree, but let me know which one of these ideas that I got wrong in describing critical race theory.